Could you just say a little bit about yourself and some of the work that you do with Vote America?
Sure. My name's Debra Cleaver. I'm the founder and CEO of VoteAmerica. I'm also the founder and former CEO of Vote.org. And I've been working at the intersection of technology and democracy since 2004. So I've been at this for a minute. The thing that drives me is that I assume the best of the voter. I reject outright the idea that low turnout in America is due to apathy. Americans aren't apathetic, they're suppressed. And Americans will vote in greater numbers and more consistently as voting becomes more convenient and accessible. So I've spent my career using technology to make it easier to navigate the needlessly complex systems of voting in America.
That is awesome. And also, I imagine very demanding work as well.
It keeps me busy.
As someone who has worked at the intersection of technology and democracy, I'm also curious to know what are some ways that we could innovate the voting process to make it more accessible?
Okay, I have so much to say about this, but first I'm going to say, just so everyone knows, that it is harder to vote in the United States than in any other country with democratically elected leadership. And I'll give you some examples. In other countries, the government registers citizens to vote. It's not on citizens to register themselves. It's on the government to maintain a list of citizens. We are the only country that votes during a workday. A lot of other countries have compulsory voting, just like filing your taxes, you are required to vote. In other countries that require you to show ID, it's because you're also, as a citizen, required to carry ID that the government provides for you. So the United States stands as an outlier in that we put the burden of registering and participating squarely on citizens. And this is something that like Americans don't know because this is the system we've always had. So we don't question it. But you know why you vote on a Tuesday in the winter? Because of farming. Because farmers couldn't vote in the spring because that's when they were planting crops, and they couldn't vote in the summer because that's when they were tending the crops, and they couldn't vote in the fall because that's when they were harvesting the crops. So winter was a great time for farmers to vote. And on Tuesday, because that's when farmers came to market, so they were already in town. So 173 years ago, Congress chose Tuesday and November because it was the single most accessible day for the majority of voters. And that, a lot of things have changed. So we live in a system that was really optimized for an agrarian society. Okay, sorry, I know that was very nerdy, but I just think it's important to know that like the systems that we live in are really, really dated. So just to give some voters practical advice, there's a concerted effort to make voting harder in the United States. There have been over 400 voter suppression bills introduced in the past year. So I think the most basic thing that people can do to arm themselves right now is learn more, specifically about the requirements of voting in your state. And voter ID requirements tend to be the most important thing to know, but I can actually make that easier for everyone. Please get a government issued ID. Like, it is nonsense that the government doesn't give you this ID, but do everything in your power to get a government issued ID, which is the gold standard of ID, so that you cannot be turned away from the polls. Second, I think a lot of people expect me to say that we should vote online. We should not vote online. That is how we get to 160% voter turnout. The internet is not secure. This is not American Idol. This is US democracy. So the most secure way for us to vote is actually on paper. You want to vote on a piece of paper. That's why vote by mail is good. That's why voting in person is good. But that doesn't mean there aren't some common sense ways that we could use technology to increase voter turnout. There are so many ways that we can modernize voter registration itself. When I first got into this game, because I've admitted look, I know I look youthful, but I'm kind of older than I used to be. Now we have online voter registration. Like, we didn't have online voter registration at all until 2002, but we don't yet have online voter registration in all 50 states. So that is bullshit. If you are an activist on the ground in Texas, please come talk to me, because we need to force Texas to have online voter registration. At the same time, what VoteAmerica is really focused on, because we're not the government, is integrating voter registration in all of the online processes that you're already using. A big focus of ours right now is integrating our voter registration workflow with registering for class on campus. There's 20 million college students and they all register for classes online, which is super cool, right? Like when I was young, you registered for classes on paper. And it's basically 5 to 10 companies in America that control all of these systems. So we've been working on integrating our voter registration workflow specifically with registering to vote for classes. And we think that is it's like a very, right? And it's actually not this huge project. We're getting a really warm reception from the companies like Blackboard, companies like Canvas. But it turns out that we need the administrators to actually turn that on. So if you are a student right now, you should go to the dean of students and say, hey, like, what are we doing to like turn on these like voter registration modules in our learning management systems? That's something we're doing on like the private side, like integrating with private companies. But I will say something I would very much like to see, and I would like to see it soon, is that we should be able to register to vote when we're filing our taxes. 93% of Americans file their taxes online, and to me that means that 93% of Americans should be able to register to vote online. We trust the IRS, we give the IRS money online, and if that security is good enough for the IRS, and it is, it should be good enough for us to register to vote. So what I would like to see over time is more opportunities for citizens to register to vote when they're dealing with other government agencies. When you go to the DMV, you're given the option to register to vote, but the DMV should not be the bedrock of American democracy. If I were going to choose an agency that should be the IRS, I would like to see that happen soon.